Hello, and welcome. You found your way to Sleepy Historian, where we explore calming, quiet pieces of the past in a way meant not to excite your mind, but to gently soothe it. This is Boring History for Sleep, a slow and wandering storytelling style created for soft bedtime, relaxation, and soft-spoken historical documentary comfort. Many people find that listening to calm bedtime storytelling helps them unwind and drift into rest. And tonight, you are invited to settle in, breathe slowly, and simply listen. If you enjoy falling asleep to boring history, and if these slow journeys into the distant past help bring you peace, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly helps you rest. You're welcome to leave a quiet comment telling me where and when you're listening. It's strangely comforting to imagine others, scattered across the world, falling asleep to the same ancient stories at the same quiet hour. Tonight's gentle exploration brings us to the ancient Greek world, where temples once stood as sacred gateways between mortal life and the divine. We'll be moving unhurriedly through small details, lingering on textures, sounds, and the slow rhythm of ancient life. Our theme is a quiet one. Strange nighttime offerings found in Greek temples. Not urgent, not thrilling, just subtle, strange, and peacefully intriguing. Over the next 2 hours, you'll hear soft history that drifts between daily life, quiet rituals, archaeology, mystery, and the contrast between ordinary people and the elite who walk the same temples under different circumstances. This will be a calm sleep story for fans of Roman and Greek history, archaeology, and slow narration, relaxing history to fall asleep to. A soft reflection on forgotten rituals, worn marble floors, flickering oil lamps, incense drifting in the night air, and offerings left at altars long after the world fell silent. So dim the lights. Let the past settle slowly around you. Let the mind wander gently. And when you're ready, we'll begin our quiet walk through time. Imagine yourself stepping quietly into the ancient Greek evening, somewhere between the fading glow of sunset and the deeper calm of early night. In this gentle twilight, the daily world softens. The sounds of markets fade into the distance. Footsteps grow slower and fewer. The warm air of the day begins to cool, and the scent of cooking fires drifts lazily across the city. It is a world without electric light, without hurry, and without the constant hum of modern life. Night arrives softly, and with it, a subtle shift in rhythm. Most people in the ancient Greek world lived predictable lives. The pattern of each day was shaped by the sun, the seasons and necessities, tending fields, preparing bread, maintaining tools, washing clothing by hand, gathering water from wells or fountains. Their homes were modest, simple clay walls, wooden beams, earthen floors, and storage vessels carefully arranged along walls. As evening settled in, families gathered near small hearths, where flames whispered and flickered in the calm stillness. Food was basic but comforting: olives, figs, barley bread, and cheese. Sometimes fish or lentils. Occasionally honey, precious and carefully rationed. The act of eating was not rushed. Life itself was unhurried, shaped by natural pace. Soft conversation flowed in the background. Low voices, the clink of clay bowls, the faint rustle of woven garments. And beyond the homes, beyond the narrow streets and quiet courtyards, rose something larger and far older: the temple. Temples in ancient Greece were not noisy or constantly filled with activity. Much of the time, they stood in silence, great stone shapes resting beneath an open sky. Tall columns held their posture like watchful guardians, and steps worn smooth by countless feet reflected the quiet continuity of belief. Though most offerings were made during daylight, the night held its own sacred mood, its own gentle pull. The boundary between the ordinary and the divine felt thinner in the dark. Imagine small oil lamps lighting the way, tiny flames dancing in carved clay bowls. Their light was soft and warm, casting gentle shadows upon stone walls. A small group might approach the temple, not in procession or ceremony, but quietly, almost privately. Some broad offerings, items shaped by personal hope, fear, or gratitude. Offerings varied widely. A clay figurine molded clumsily by inexperienced hands. A simple bronze pin once used to fasten a garment. Grain wrapped in cloth. Honey sealed in tiny pottery vessels. Small things, fragile, yet meaningful. The act of leaving an offering was never hurried. It was contemplative, slow, a moment where the world paused and thought became stillness. The night breeze carried the faint aroma of burning incense. Resin and herbs warmed on small charcoal coals. It mingled with the natural smells of the earth, dried dust, olive trees, and distant sea air. Silence was not complete. There were soft rustlings of animals settling into sleep, the distant call of night insects, and the gentle brush of sandals against stone. But everything was quieter, calmer, as though the world itself breathed more slowly. Some individuals came not only to honor the gods, but to find reassurance. In a world shaped by uncertainty, illness, harvests, storms, shifting politics, temples offered a steady anchor. Even the act of walking toward a sacred space at night could bring a sense of release, a softening of worry. As you picture this scene, allow yourself to breathe more gently, more slowly. Let your imagination linger on every small detail. The texture of stone beneath bare feet, the flickering glow of a lamp flame, the stillness in the air. Nearby, priests or attendants might tend a low-burning fire, speaking little. Their movements were practiced, measured, familiar. They understood the significance of repetition, the way predictability encourages calm. The rhythm of their actions echoed the rhythm of life itself. Steady, quiet, unbroken. To walk among these structures at night was to feel time stretch. The present moment flowed into centuries of past ritual and future expectation. Lives changed, civilizations rose and fell, but the temple remained, a silent witness to countless footsteps, prayers, and offerings. If you listen closely, not with effort, but with quiet openness, you might almost sense that timeless presence. Not loud, not demanding, simply there. Persistent, watchful, ancient. And so, the scene settles. The lamps glow gently. The night deepens. And the offerings, humble, ordinary, yet deeply meaningful, rest upon stone altars, waiting in stillness. This is where our quiet exploration begins. As night continues to unfold across the ancient Greek landscape, the world becomes quieter still. The streets empty, and the soft glow of small household lamps begins to fade as families drift into sleep. Yet, the temple grounds remain gently alive. Not bustling, not busy, but quietly attended by those who move slowly through ritual or reflection. Imagine walking further along a worn stone path. Each step is steady, unhurried. The surface beneath your feet carries the faint warmth of sunlight long gone, holding on to the day just a little longer. Small tufts of grass grow through cracks in the paving stones, and here and there, wildflowers lean toward the night air as if listening. The temple looms ahead, not intimidating but solemn. A structure carved from stone that feels both permanent and peaceful. Soft moonlight gathers along the edges of its columns, outlining grooves that craftsmen carved hundreds of years before. These lines are not perfect. Time has softened their edges, but the design remains recognizable, intentional, enduring. The temple stands as a reminder. Nothing in daily life lasted forever, and yet meaning could still be found in what one left behind. A gentle wind pushes loose dust across the ground, carrying with it the faint sound of leaves rustling from sacred groves planted nearby. Olive trees stretch upward with twisted, ancient trunks, and cypress trees stand tall and narrow, forming quiet silhouettes against the night sky. The stars, unbothered by artificial lights, shine clearly, bright points scattered across deep darkness. Near the base of the temple steps, a few people linger. A woman with a small clay pot rests her hands around it, steady and deliberate. A young man stands quietly behind her, head lowered, holding a small carved tablet. The mood is not urgent. There is no rush. Every gesture is soft, respectful, shaped by centuries of belief and tradition. Animals, too, are present in subtle ways. A small stray cat moves carefully between shadows, pausing now and then as if observing the rituals with familiar curiosity. Somewhere farther off, a donkey shifts its weight and exhales a long, slow breath, the sound blending seamlessly into the atmosphere. Nature, people, and sacred architecture coexist gently in this moment. Inside the temple walls, the air is cooler, still, and filled with the quiet echo of stone. Flames from low-burning lamps cast soft, wavering halos of light across the interior. Shadows stretch and withdraw with each slight movement of wick or flame, creating a rhythmic pattern, unpredictable yet calm, almost meditative. The stone floor beneath you has been polished smooth by countless footsteps. It feels cool, firm, and grounding. Small offerings rest in shallow depressions carved into altars or set upon designated spaces along the walls. Nothing appears lavish or extravagant here. Even those who could afford costly gifts often chose modest symbols. The gesture mattered more than the object. Some offerings were prayerful, requests for health, fertility, guidance, calm seas, or safe travel. Others expressed gratitude for a healed illness, a successful harvest, or the safe return of a loved one. And some, perhaps the most intriguing, held meaning now forgotten. Clay objects shaped like body parts, miniature sandals, carved eyes, small terracotta animals, or strange symbols whose purpose remains unknown. Archaeologists study these quiet gifts, piecing together meaning slowly, patiently. But in their time, worshippers understood without needing explanation. Rituals did not require urgency or spectacle. They unfolded gently, moving at the same pace as breath, as evening, as memory. The woman with the clay pot finally steps forward, raising her offering with both hands. Her movement is slow, almost ceremonial, though no formal ceremony is being performed. She places the vessel carefully among other offerings and rests her fingertips upon it for a moment, as though sealing a silent request within its stillness. Then she steps back. No one applauds. No voice calls out. Her action is private, personal, and complete. Nearby, the young man places his carved tablet beside others like it. The tablet contains writing, simple, direct, a brief invocation. The marks are etched deeply enough to endure, yet soft enough to look almost fragile in the shifting light. There's a deep sense of continuity here. A person could come to this place seeking answers or comfort, yet what they often found was something quieter: acceptance, presence, a return to balance. The temple did not offer instant clarity or dramatic transformation. Instead, it offered space to breathe, to acknowledge uncertainty, to exist alongside mystery rather than conquering it. And in that quiet allowance, many found peace. Eventually, visitors step away from the altar and begin their return home. Their steps are soft, their posture lighter. The night sky opens wide overhead, steady and timeless. The temple remains, watching, waiting, patient as stone, gentle as moonlight. The rhythm of ancient life continues, slow and enduring. As the night deepened in ancient Greece, the world became softer still, as though sound itself grew weary. The temple grounds did not sleep, but they rested. The movement of people slowed until only one or two remained nearby, either finishing offerings or simply sitting in quiet reflection. The moon, steady and pale, cast a gentle glow over stone and earth, making edges smoother and shadows longer. In this hour, the city around the temple would have been nearly silent. Homes closed their doors. Oil lamps were extinguished one by one, leaving rooms in darkness except for the soft glow of embers in a hearth. The warmth of the day had faded completely, replaced by a still and refreshing coolness. In the distance, the soft rhythm of waves could sometimes be heard where the sea touched the shore, and the night insects continued their steady chorus. Unhurried, repetitive, calming. For many people, nighttime was a boundary between the ordered tasks of daily life and the inward-focused world of thought, hope, and belief. By day, life depended on discipline. Fields must be tended at the right time, goods measured carefully, responsibilities fulfilled. But at night, imagination, memory, and uncertainty quietly surfaced. The offerings left in temples at these late hours reflected that shift. Objects of worry, longing, or unanswered questions. In some temples, inscriptions recorded nighttime rituals, quiet supplications, soft chanting, not the loud celebration of festivals, but the quiet seeking of guidance, especially when illness lingered, journeys loomed, or dreams brought unclear messages. Some historians believe that nighttime offerings were seen as especially intimate, placed when the world was still enough for the gods to listen closely. Picture a small group of individuals gathered near a low-burning brazier. The fire glows faintly, illuminating their faces with warm, unsteady light. They murmur simple prayers, not dramatic or emotional, but rhythmic and steady, like breath. Their words rise into the darkness and dissolve into the night air. No elaborate ritual is visible, only gentle repetition and the calm certainty that someone or something might be listening. Nearby, the stone walls of the temple interior hold a subtle scent, traces of incense absorbed through many generations. Resinous, slightly sweet, with layers of time embedded within it. The smell does not overwhelm. It lingers softly, like a gentle reminder of earlier offerings now long gone. Within alcoves carved into the temple walls rest objects placed by worshippers over decades or even centuries. Some appear almost identical. Rows of clay figurines shaped into simple forms, goddesses, animals, or abstract symbols. Others look deeply personal, a ring once worn daily, a broken tool repaired and polished, or even a small piece of fabric carefully folded and set into a niche where no wind could disturb it. These offerings, though small, held meaning far beyond their material value. They represented connections between the mortal world and the divine, not through spectacle or showmanship, but through quiet devotion. The slow act of walking to the temple, placing an offering, and stepping away created a rhythm of reverence woven into everyday life. Several inscriptions suggest that some offerings were left specifically at night to avoid being seen, not out of shame, but because certain requests were private, matters of the heart, matters of illness, or uncertain futures. In those quiet hours, anonymity felt protective. The darkness wrapped each prayer gently, making it easier to express a whispered hope that daylight might have made self-conscious. Even the priests understood this subtle space. Their role at night was less about leading and more about keeping vigil. They tended the flames, ensured offerings remained undisturbed, and maintained the atmosphere of stillness. Their presence was steady rather than authoritative, a reminder of both order and openness. Some nights, faint traces of music could be heard, not loud or energetic, but simple melodies played on a small lyre or flute. These sounds carried across the temple courtyard, weaving through the columns, merging with the night itself. The music was not meant to entertain. It was meant to soothe, to focus the mind, and to maintain a gentle continuity between breath and atmosphere. If you pause here in imagination, you might feel the timelessness of the scene. A still night, soft music, glowing fire, ancient stone, and small handmade objects waiting quietly as symbols of need, gratitude, or surrender. Eventually, even the last few visitors would step away. Their pace remained slow, unhurried. There was no sense of finality, only continuation. The offering was left, but its significance extended long beyond the moment. The temple held memories not as stories or records, but as objects resting in stillness. By the time silence fully returned, the scene felt complete. The temple remained open, attentive, patient. The moon continued its path across the sky, and every offering, from the simplest clay bead to the most carefully carved tablet, became part of a long and gentle chain of human hope reaching into the unknown. That was not an ending. It was a quiet space where meaning was allowed to settle. Now, let us shift gently, unhurriedly, from the quiet rhythm of daily life to the more focused story of a single historical figure. Someone whose influence touched temple rituals, including those subtle offerings left in darkness. For this segment, imagine a priest associated with a well-known sanctuary, someone not remembered by name in grand inscriptions, yet representative of countless individuals who fulfilled similar roles. We will call him Damon, not because history records him, but because such a name was common enough among priests in the classical Greek world. By speaking of him this way, we allow the imagination to rest upon one calm narrative instead of many scattered fragments. Imagine Damon walking along the temple grounds in the late evening. He is not young, but not old, somewhere in the middle years of life. His steps are measured, familiar, quietly confident. He wears a simple wool garment, clean but not ornate. His role grants respect, but not luxury. The temple belongs not to him, but to the gods. He is merely its caretaker. His home sits not far from the sanctuary, a modest dwelling, with herbs hanging to dry near the doorway and clay amphorae resting along the walls. From his doorway, he can see the temple steps, the sacred trees, and beyond them, a dark stretch of sky scattered with stars. The quiet of night is something he has grown comfortable with over many years. Where others may find the darkness uncertain, he finds it steady, consistent, familiar. Damon's responsibilities are practical, but shaped by reverence. He tends the sacred flame, ensuring it never extinguishes. He records offerings, not every detail, but enough to acknowledge their presence. He listens to those who approach the altar with questions or uncertain thoughts, though he rarely gives direct answers. His purpose is not to interpret the will of the gods, but to maintain the environment where others might sense that will for themselves. Long before the night offerings are placed, Damon prepares the temple. He sweeps the stone floor, not hurriedly, but with slow, repeated movements. Each stroke of the broom clears dust, but also renews the expected order. Then he checks the lamps, replacing oil where needed, trimming wicks carefully with practiced precision. His movements are part of a rhythm older than he is, older than any single generation. When worshipers arrive, he does not interrupt them. He watches discreetly, attentive but distant. He understands that many offerings are private expressions, moments where words may be unnecessary or even burdensome. His presence is steady, a quiet reassurance rather than a guiding voice. Some individuals approach him softly, just above a whisper. They speak of a fever that has lingered too long, a journey planned but feared, a child yet unborn, or a trade negotiation uncertain in outcome. Damon listens quietly. He offers simple responses, sometimes a brief phrase drawn from tradition, sometimes a gentle nod, and occasionally only silence. His role is not to solve, but to accompany. And yet, even a priest experiences moments of uncertainty. There are times when Damon looks upon the offerings, rows upon rows of clay figurines, tablets, beads, animal-shaped amulets, and wonders about the private weight each object carries. The temple gathers hopes like the sea gathers water, continuously, without overflow. Late one evening, Damon encounters an offering unlike the usual ones. A small clay figurine shaped not with careful symmetry, but with crooked edges and uneven texture, clearly sculpted by an inexperienced hand. It depicts a small child with one arm missing, not broken but formed that way from the beginning. The figurine is not refined, yet it conveys something deeply personal, perhaps a reflection of someone loved, feared for, or recently lost. Damon holds it for a long moment before placing it gently among the other offerings. He does not speculate. He does not try to understand. He simply acknowledges its presence, giving it the same space and respect as finely crafted objects. There is something profoundly human in that simple act. As the night continues, Damon moves through the temple's interior once more. He tends the brazier, adjusts the lamp flame, and pauses near the doorway to look out at the landscape. The stars remain steady overhead. The sacred grove sways softly in the wind. The temple stands silent but not empty, its meaning carried by the lives who come to it and the objects they leave behind. Damon has served as priest for many years, and he will likely continue until his body can no longer keep pace with ritual. His work is not dramatic, nor does he seek recognition. Instead, his presence forms part of the temple's continuity, the slow thread that connects lives, beliefs, landscapes, and time. Through him, we glimpse not a monumental historical figure, but a quiet custodian of tradition. Someone whose life, though ordinary, supported a world where offerings placed in darkness carried weight and meaning without needing explanation. As the years passed, Damon's role as priest evolved naturally, not through sudden change, but through the slow shaping of habit, familiarity, and time. The temple became an extension of his daily rhythm, and in return, he became part of its memory. His movements grew even more measured, his gestures more subtle, his understanding deeper but never hurried. The world outside the sanctuary continued to shift. Seasons changed. Political tensions drifted through the region. Merchants brought new goods from distant lands. Strange spices, unfamiliar pottery forms, new fabrics dyed in shades rarely seen. Yet within the temple walls, the atmosphere remained consistent, still, reverent, unbroken by the noise of the outside world. Damon knew that while kingdoms might rise and fall, the need for quiet offerings and silent hopes would endure. One evening, much like countless others, Damon began his nightly responsibilities. The air was cool, and clouds drifted slowly across the sky, occasionally revealing thin crescents of moonlight. The temple grounds appeared slightly dimmer under the shifting sky, but the lamps inside offered a stable, warm glow. Damon paused to observe the first group of visitors approaching, 3 individuals walking with deliberate slowness. Among them was an older man carrying a small wooden box. His posture was careful, protective, as though the object inside was fragile or deeply meaningful. When the group reached the altar, the older man opened the box and revealed a tiny carved lion, a symbol often associated with strength or protection. The carving was worn smooth, as if handled many times. Perhaps it had belonged to a child or served as a household charm through generations. Damon watched quietly, bowed his head slightly, and stepped back. The older man placed the lion among the other offerings and pressed his palm gently against the altar. The gesture was brief, but it carried weight, soft emotion expressed through action rather than words. After they left, Damon moved closer to observe the new offering. He picked it up gently, turning it slowly in his hands. The carving was simple but deliberate, and the years had softened the edges. Damon wondered whether the object was being surrendered in grief or in hope, or perhaps both. He set it down again, giving it space among the growing collection. Later that night, another visitor arrived, this time a woman carrying a folded fragment of cloth. Her steps were hesitant, perhaps uncertain. When she reached Damon, she whispered something too soft for anyone else to hear. Damon listened, nodded once, and guided her to a quiet alcove. There, she placed the cloth and rested her forehead lightly against the cool stone wall. For a moment, she remained perfectly still, her breath deep and steady. Then she stepped away, leaving the cloth behind. Damon did not examine this offering. He sensed in the woman's demeanor that it represented something deeply personal, perhaps loss, perhaps the memory of someone she wished to keep close yet release symbolically into the care of the divine. He respected that space. As Damon continued his rounds, he encountered other offerings, some ordinary, some unusual. A small bronze ring, worn thin through years of use. A carved wooden flute, though the reeds no longer produced sound. A tiny terracotta horse with one ear chipped away. Even a simple seashell, its ridges softened by time spent tumbling in tide water. To someone from another culture, such objects might appear random. But for Damon, And for those who placed them, these offerings represented intimate connections to life's fragile uncertainties. In a world without predictable medicine, stable governments, or technological assurances, faith acted as a quiet anchor. The offerings were not merely tokens. They were gestures of release, trust, and longing. There were moments, rare and deeply private, when Damon also placed offerings of his own. He did not do this publicly, nor did he announce his intentions. His offerings were small and discreet. Once, he left a simple bead carved from olive wood. Another time, a tiny clay token marked with a single line symbolizing protection. These moments reminded him that he was not separate from those who came seeking guidance. His role was service, but his humanity remained intact. Like everyone else, he faced uncertainties, and like everyone else, he sought peace in ritual and stillness. As the years continued, Damon began mentoring a younger assistant, a quiet boy named Theon, whose temperament reflected the same calm steadiness necessary for temple life. Theon followed Damon during evening rounds, watching and learning. Damon taught him not through stern correction or rigid instruction, but through quiet observation and gentle repetition. Over time, Theon began to understand one of the silent truths of temple life, that the priest's greatest responsibility was not to speak, but to listen, not to command, but to maintain presence. The temple did not demand force or spectacle. It asked for patience, care, and deep respect. As Damon aged and Theon grew older, their roles gradually shifted. Damon walked more slowly. His steps became softer, almost disappearing against the stone floor. Theon took on more tasks, trimming wicks, recording offerings, tending the flame. Damon watched him with a calm sense of continuity. Not pride, not ownership, but a quiet awareness that tradition would continue beyond his lifetime. Nothing changed sharply. Everything shifted gently, like sand moved gradually by wind. And through these nights, the temple remained steady, its offerings accumulating, its silence deepening, its purpose preserved by those who served with patience and care. Years continued to unfold quietly, one season blending into the next with a soft and steady pace. Damon's presence within the temple became almost inseparable from the stone itself. Just as the sacred flame was never left unattended, neither was the temple without someone to walk its grounds with understanding and care. Yet time, as always, moved gently forward. As Theon grew in confidence and experience, Damon began stepping back from the weight of nightly duties. Not abruptly, but gradually, like a lamp flame dimming as another is lit beside it. Their roles shifted without words, without ceremony. It simply happened in the same quiet manner as every other change within the sanctuary. Still, Damon continued to visit the temple at night. Even when his responsibilities lessened, the rhythm of evening offerings was ingrained deeply enough that remaining home felt strange. On these nights, he walked more slowly, sometimes pausing to rest a hand against a column or to steady himself near a stair. His movements were not burdensome or painful, just softened with age. Theon, attentive and present, never hurried him. He simply walked alongside when needed and stepped aside when silence felt more appropriate. It was during one of these later years that a particularly unusual offering appeared. Theon discovered it first, a small, sealed clay vessel unlike most others. Its shape was rounded and smooth, carefully crafted, and closed with a stopper engraved with symbols that neither Damon nor Theon recognized immediately. The object seemed intentional and meaningful, yet mysterious. The vessel had been placed gently, not tossed or forgotten. There were no accompanying inscriptions or markings, only the object itself, set slightly apart from the others, as though the giver intended it to be noticed, yet not opened. Theon held it with both hands and turned it slowly in the lamplight. Damon watched him quietly before stepping closer. He did not reach for the vessel immediately. Instead, he observed the engraved symbols with patient attention. These marks, Damon murmured in a calm, steady tone, are older than the temple. Theon nodded, waiting without pressing for explanation. They belong to a time when offerings were made not to gods known by names and stories, Damon continued, but to forces, wind, earth, river, and fire. Before temples resembled the ones we tend now. There was no fear in his voice, only quiet recognition. The offering, though unusual, belonged to a long continuum of belief. The unknown was not threatening. It was simply another layer of the ancient world remaining in quiet conversation with the present. Damon placed the vessel back in its position and bowed his head slightly, acknowledging its presence with the same respect shown to all offerings. Theon followed his gesture, absorbing the lesson. Nothing left in devotion should be dismissed, even when its meaning is unclear. As the night continued, a soft mist drifted across the temple grounds. It gathered in low spaces first, around the base of columns, along stone pathways, before lifting gently into the open air. The temple looked different in the mist, as though partially veiled, softened, or half-remembered. Damon stood still for a long moment, watching the haze and listening to the distant hum of night insects. He spoke again, though not to instruct, more as a reflection shaped aloud. In time, others will stand where we stand. They will wonder about the objects left here, just as we wonder about those before us. And most answers will remain quiet. Theon didn't respond. The silence held meaning. Later that night, when most tasks were complete, the two walked together outside the temple walls. The sky had cleared again, revealing the soft pattern of stars overhead. The air was crisp but not cold. Cypress branches swayed gently beside the sacred walkway. Damon paused beside one of the trees and rested his hand against its bark. The tree was old, older than Damon, older than Theon, perhaps older than the temple itself. Its presence felt steady, enduring, like a silent witness. "We serve," Damon said softly, "not because we expect recognition, but because the continuity matters." Theon absorbed the words, understanding that they were not instructions but a passing of perspective, something meant to settle slowly, like sediment in water. With the passage of months, Damon's nightly visits became shorter. Some nights he stayed only long enough to ensure everything was in order, offering a quiet nod to Theon before returning home. Other nights, he remained longer, standing near the altar or tracing the carvings along the temple wall with slow fingers, as though relearning every line. Eventually, there came a night when Damon no longer walked to the temple. No announcement, no final gesture, only absence. Theon tended the lamps, recorded offerings, and walked the familiar path alone. But the sanctuary did not feel empty. Damon's years of presence lingered in the rhythm of each task, in the tone of quiet respect, in the way Theon placed offerings gently rather than hurriedly. Time continued. Visitors still came under moonlight, still left symbols of hope and uncertainty, still paused in silent reflection before returning to their lives. The priest had changed, but the temple remained. And because the rhythm endured, nothing was truly lost. Morning in the temple did not begin with urgency. There were no sudden bells, no rapid movements, no sharp demands for activity. Instead, the day unfolded gradually, like the slow blooming of a flower. Light from the rising sun shifted gently across the courtyard stones, turning cold gray into soft gold. Theon awoke early, as he always did, not because he was required to, but because the rhythm had become natural. His body knew the pattern: sleep, waking breath, stillness, then motion. He rose quietly, washed his face and hands with cool water, and wrapped his garment carefully around his shoulders. The fabric felt familiar, softened by years of wear. Stepping into the courtyard, he paused, not to judge the time, but simply to feel the world. A faint breeze carried the scents of cypress, clay, and distant sea air. Morning insects hummed softly. Birds shifted in nearby branches, but did not yet sing. The temple complex held a kind of gentle hush, as though it wished to remain half asleep just a little longer. Theon walked the path to the altar with steady steps. Each movement was unhurried. He inspected the offerings placed during the night. small items arranged with care. A finely woven braid of grass, a small carved fish, a handful of barley grains gathered into a folded scrap of linen. And from the previous evening, the sealed vessel with ancient symbols remained undisturbed. Nothing needed to be changed. Nothing required immediate action. Still, Theon took his time. He adjusted the placement of a few offerings, not correcting them, but allowing them to rest more comfortably in the space. A devoted offering was not merely set down, it was received. Once satisfied, he lit the morning lamps. The flames flickered softly, dancing with the faint breeze before settling into steady light. Fire did not need to be bright or large to be meaningful. Even a small flame could carry presence. After tending the altar, Theon moved to the storeroom where clay jars lined the walls. Inside were herbs for incense, oil for lamps, and scrolls containing records of past offerings. The scrolls were written in steady, consistent handwriting, Damon's work. The ink was faded in some sections, darker in others, but all of it read with a tone of quiet care. Theon unrolled the most recent scroll and began recording the morning state of the shrine. He wrote slowly, shaping each letter with precision. The record was not made for praise or display. It was simply a continuation, a thread connecting every day to the next. Once finished, he set the scroll aside and returned outdoors. The temple, now touched more fully by sunlight, appeared warmer. Shadows softened along column edges. The stone walkway radiated gentle heat from the new day. Visitors often arrived later, after completing their own morning routines. Some came seeking guidance. Others came to leave offerings. A few arrived only to sit in silence. Theon welcomed all of them with equal softness. He did not speak unless spoken of first. He did not hurry anyone. The temple offered space, and space required quiet. As the sun continued to rise, soft footsteps echoed through the courtyard. Theon turned and saw a woman approaching. She carried a small object wrapped in cloth. Her posture was neither hesitant nor urgent, simply deliberate. When she reached Theon, she lowered her gaze respectfully and unfolded the cloth to reveal her offering, a small clay tablet etched with a delicate pattern of waves. The surface bore faint tool marks, evidence of careful shaping, smoothing, and engraving. Theon accepted the offering with both hands, not as a possession, but as a trust. "Thank you," he said softly. The woman bowed her head once more before departing. She did not linger, and Theon did not watch her leave. Instead, he turned his attention to the tablet. The symbol carved into it was unfamiliar, not common among offerings, but it carried intention. The lines were graceful, flowing, measured. Perhaps it represented longing, or memory, or something unspoken but deeply felt. The tablet was placed beside the sealed vessel with ancient symbols. The two objects, one old, one new, rested quietly together, neither demanding explanation. Next came a child, barely old enough to speak clearly. She carried a small pebble, nothing remarkable in shape or color, yet held it with great seriousness. Her steps were small but determined. Theon knelt to meet her gaze. She extended the pebble and whispered, "For safety." Theon nodded gently. "It will be honored." The girl smiled with relief, bowed her head in her own small interpretation of temple etiquette, and returned to her waiting parent. The pebble was placed among the offerings with the same care given to all others. Time passed. The sun reached its highest point, then slowly began its descent. The day remained tranquil. No dramatic changes, no disruptions. Just quiet rhythm, steady pace, continuous presence. As afternoon softened toward evening, Theon walked once more along the temple perimeter. The shadows lengthened. Birds now sang softly in distant trees. A sense of gentle closing settled over the space. Not ending, but shifting. The temple had moved through another day. Nothing extraordinary had occurred, yet every moment felt whole. The rhythm continued. As twilight approached, something shifted, not in a dramatic sense, but in a way that felt subtle and ancient, as though the temple itself began to adjust to a different purpose. Day belonged to the visible world. voices, footsteps, ritual order. Night, however, belonged to the unseen. It carried meaning that could not always be spoken. Archaeologists studying Greek temples centuries later would come to notice a pattern. Certain offerings were placed only at night. These were not the typical votives of clay animals or carved figurines. Instead, they tended to be objects that seemed unfinished, symbolic, or quietly personal. Among the items recovered from temple excavation sites were objects that puzzled researchers, not because they were extravagant, but because they felt deeply specific. A length of braided thread tied into a small knot. A clay tablet inscribed, not with a prayer, but with a repeating series of symbols. Seashells containing charred plant remains. Smooth stones marked with 3 small dots arranged in a triangle. To modern eyes, these items may appear simple, but simplicity does not diminish meaning. In fact, sometimes simplicity reveals intention more clearly. Some scholars suggest these offerings were connected to dreams. In ancient Greece, dreams were often seen as pathways between the physical world and the divine. Certain temples, even beyond the famous healing sanctuary of Asclepius, appear to have been places where people sought meaning not from dramatic rituals, but from sleep. In some of these temples, stone benches were found arranged in small alcoves. The benches were wide enough to lie down comfortably, yet not meant for long-term rest. Their placement near altars suggests they were used for incubation, rest taken in hopes of receiving guidance through dreams. It is believed that those who slept there left tokens from their dreams, objects representing what they wished to understand or release. Just as a modern person might write thoughts in a journal before sleep, ancient visitors placed their silent hopes in a physical form. The sealed vessel in Theon's temple, the one with ancient symbols, may have held such offerings. Containers like it had been found buried beneath temple floors, stored in hidden niches, or tucked behind altars. Some contain scrolls or fragments of writing. Others hold herbs associated with memory, healing, or calm. A few contain small figurines intentionally broken, not shattered violently, but carefully divided, as if symbolizing release. Archaeologists rarely open these vessels now. Many remain sealed, preserved as they were left, not out of superstition, but out of respect for intention. To open one is to interrupt a private conversation between a person and the unseen. Even without opening them, their presence suggests stories. Someone seeking relief from grief, someone attempting to sever a lingering memory, someone uncertain, someone hopeful, someone quietly asking for clarity. The temple in our story followed this pattern. And as Theon prepared the evening fire at the altar, the surroundings felt different, not tense, not mysterious in a frightening way, but gently expectant. Night brought a different kind of reverence, slower and quieter than day. When the sun finally slipped below the horizon, oil lamps glowed softly against the marble walls. Their light was diffused, warm, and gentle. Shadows drifted across carved columns, not menacing but peaceful, like slow-moving water. Visitors arrived with slower steps than earlier in the day. Some carried objects wrapped in cloth. Others carried nothing, simply waiting. Theon greeted each person with the same quiet nod. No questions were asked. No explanations were necessary. A young man approached with a folded bundle. His clothing was simple, worn at the edges, suggesting travel. When he unfolded the cloth, he revealed a set of small, ivory dice. They were carved with symbols rather than numbers, spirals, lines, shapes that meant something personal to him. Theon noticed faint where along the edges where the man's fingers had held them many times. Theon gently placed the dice at the altar. The visitor lowered his head, lingered in silence, then withdrew. Another visitor, a woman this time, carried a small terracotta figure. The surface was smooth but unfinished. The face bore only faint outline, not expression. Theon placed it among the other offerings, where the warm lamplight softened its edges. Each object had a quiet voice. The night accepted them without judgment. Later, after the final visitors stepped back into the calm darkness, Theon approached the sealed vessel again. He knelt beside it, not to open it, but to sit in its presence. The symbols carved into its clay felt older than the temple itself. Some of the markings had worn faint with age, but their pattern remained steady. Spirals, concentric circles, a repeated motif resembling waves or movement. Some believed such symbols represented transition. Others believed they represented a journey of the spirit, something between waking and sleeping, life and memory, fear and acceptance. No one truly knew. Perhaps that was the point. As the night deepened, the temple grew still. Lamp flame steadied. Stone cooled. Footsteps ceased. Only the faint rhythm of distant night insects remained. And in that quiet space, something softer than silence settled in. A sense of continuity of countless nights before this one, and countless nights still to come. Nothing was urgent. Nothing needed resolution. The offerings waited. The temple breathed, and the night passed gently around them. As the night moved forward and the temple settled deeper into stillness, the boundary between waking thought and drifting reflection grew softer. The oil lamps that had burned brightly earlier now glowed with a quieter, gentler flame, still present, yet subdued. Their warm light flickered faintly across carved inscriptions and offered a subtle reminder that time, even in sacred places, always moves forward. Modern archaeologists have spent years studying what remained hidden in these temples long after their voices fell silent. Excavations revealed layers of offerings, carefully arranged and intentionally hidden. They were layered not randomly, but as though each generation or each pilgrim respected the placement of the ones before them. Many offerings rested directly beneath the temple floors, sometimes encased in clay, sometimes sealed in stone compartments. These spaces were not marked or labeled. Their purpose seems to have been understood through tradition rather than instruction. Some discovered objects bore signs of ritual closure: smoke stains, ash rings, or faint traces of scented oil. Others were placed within small woven baskets. Still others were wrapped in cloth that had long since decayed, leaving only faint impressions in soil layers. In some cases, impressions of threads remained visible, like ghost patterns left behind. These artifacts speak quietly. They do not announce themselves or demand interpretation. Instead, they wait patiently for meaning to form. Scholars have proposed many theories: purification rites, spiritual protection, dream interpretation practices, or rituals of emotional transition. Perhaps the truth contains elements of all of these. Or perhaps the truth is something entirely different, something more personal, something not meant to be fully explained. One recurring find across multiple temple sites has captured particular curiosity: smooth stones marked with deliberate lines or symbols. Some contain simple patterns: 3 parallel lines, a single spiral, a circle enclosing a dot. Others feature more elaborate designs: intersecting curves, repeated shapes, or motifs resembling constellations. These markings are always intentional, never accidental. They were carved with care, often with tools fine enough to leave precise boundaries. Some researchers suggest these stones were connected to the ancient belief in symbolic language, messages not meant to be spoken aloud, but understood intuitively by gods and dreams. The stones may have acted as a kind of silent request, placed where mortal and divine could briefly intersect. Within our temple, Theon had seen such items before. He never asked their makers what they meant, nor did he feel the urge to interpret them. His role was simply to receive, arrange, and preserve. The meaning belonged only to the person who placed the object, and perhaps, if the gods listened, to something beyond understanding. On this particular night, after tending to the offerings, Theon walked to a quiet corner of the courtyard where an old olive tree stood, its trunk twisted and weathered, shaped by generations of wind and time. The tree's leaves shimmered softly in the faint moonlight, creating a gentle whispering sound as they moved. Some believe trees near temples held a unique presence, a connection between earth and divine. Whether symbol or truth, the tree brought comfort. At its base rested another clay container, older than the one near the altar. Its surface was rougher, less detailed, and partially worn smooth by decades of changing weather. Theon placed one hand gently upon its surface, not to open it, but to acknowledge it. Objects like these were sometimes called resting archives. They contained stories without requiring them to be retold. Nearby, a shallow stone basin held a small pool of water. Moonlight reflected upon its surface, creating soft ripples whenever a breeze crossed its edge. Visitors sometimes paused at this basin before leaving their offering. They touched the water lightly with the tips of their fingers, not to cleanse but to transition. The water acted as a threshold, the moment between holding on to a thought and letting it go. Tonight, Theon dipped his fingers into the basin, then let the droplets fall gently back into the water. There was no ritual phrase, no prescribed gesture, only a quiet acknowledgement of the moment. As he stood in the stillness, the sounds of the night carried softly through the surroundings. Faint insects, distant waves, perhaps even fabric shifting as a sleeping bird adjusted its position. Time moved softly here, unhurried and unforced. In the world beyond the temple, life continued. Markets prepared goods for morning trade. Households tended evening fires, and travelers sought places to rest. Yet within these temple walls, night felt different. Here, time was measured not by activity, but by presence. Eventually, Theon returned to the central altar. He knelt once more, not out of duty, but out of quiet habit. The sealed vessel, the clay tablet with wave markings, the ivory dice, the pebble from the young child, all rested side by side. Different hands, different intentions, different stories, yet all united by a simple shared act: offering. Over centuries, these offerings would become buried, forgotten, waiting beneath layers of soil until rediscovered by curious hands. Archaeologists would carefully brush away dust, fragment by fragment, and attempt to read meaning from silence. Some findings would be recorded in journals. Others would rest in museums behind glass. A few pieces would remain untouched, left exactly where they were found, preserved in place for future scholars or for no one at all. And through all of it, the offerings would continue to speak, not loudly, not clearly, but gently, in a language made of patience and memory. The night deepened. Theon lowered his gaze, exhaled softly, and allowed silence to fill the moment. Nothing more needed to happen. The temple rested. The offerings endured. The mystery remained intact. While many offerings in Greek temples came from ordinary people, merchants, farmers, travelers, children, and those simply seeking quiet comfort, temples also received contributions from individuals of higher status. Wealthy families, local leaders, aristocrats, and occasionally those considered influential in political or military spheres came to pray for guidance, legacy, or protection. Their presence added another subtle layer to the temple's rhythm. Unlike the quiet pebble given by a child or the hand-shaped clay token of a traveling craftsman, the offerings of the elite were often larger in scale. Yet, despite their size, these offerings did not disrupt the temple's calm. In this place, even wealth softened its voice. During one particularly quiet evening, shortly after sunset, the calm footsteps of a small group approached the temple gate. Their pace was deliberate, not rushed, but measured, as though each step carried intention. The visitors moved beneath the torchlit entryway, and the gentle crackle of flame echoed softly in the still air. At their center walked a man named Lysandros, an aristocrat known within the city not for loud authority, but for a reserved presence. His clothing was of woven fabric finer than that worn by laborers or merchants. The garment fell around him in smooth layers, dyed in muted tones rather than bright display. His hair was tied simply. There was dignity in his posture, but not arrogance. He carried an offering wrapped in linen. The shape beneath the fabric suggested something crafted rather than found. His accompanying attendants remained silent as they entered the courtyard, waiting respectfully behind him while he continued toward the altar. Theon noticed their arrival, but did not hurry to greet them. As always, movement within the temple followed the rhythm of breath, slow, steady, unforced. He approached Lysandros with a gentle nod, a greeting that acknowledged presence without requesting explanation. Lysandros bowed slightly, then unfolded the linen. Inside rested a finely carved small sculpture. It was made from pale marble. In the flickering lamp glow, the details appeared soft rather than sharp. The sculpture depicted a stylized form, not a full figure, but a symbolic motif, a pair of gently curving wings meeting at a central point, neither spread nor folded completely. Theon observed the offering calmly. He did not ask what it meant. In this place, meaning was not spoken aloud unless freely shared. After a moment, Lysandros exhaled softly. "My family has experienced uncertainty," he said quietly. "There are decisions ahead. No immediate danger. Only questions." Thea nodded once. The temple had known many such visitors. Some elites sought power or victory. Others sought clarity, peace, or acceptance. Regardless of status, the emotions beneath the offering often mirrored those left by ordinary visitors. Titles and wealth did not change the fragility of uncertainty. The marble offering was placed beside the other objects at the altar. Though larger and more skillfully fashioned, it did not overshadow them. The pebble from the child, the woven grass braid, the clay tablet, all rested in equal silence. Lysandros remained still for a time, letting the moment settle. His attendants waited patiently, not shifting or whispering. Even those accustomed to structure and authority seemed to understand the tone of the space. Eventually, Lysandros stepped back and bowed his head once more, not to Theon, but to the altar itself. His visit was brief, yet complete. After he left, Theon took a moment to adjust the placement of the marble wings, ensuring they did not lean too heavily against the surrounding offerings. Balance was important, not symbolic balance, but physical stability. Every object rested as comfortably as the next. Across centuries, archaeologists have found evidence of similar elite offerings. Larger clay vessels, intricately carved votives, silver coins, or stylized bronze shapes. Yet even the most finely made offerings were placed alongside simpler ones. Wealth did not guarantee permanence. In many temples, it is the smallest offerings, the pebbles, the carved shells, the shaped wax tokens, that survived longest, protected by layers of time. This quiet equality reflected something subtle but profound. Regardless of status, every person carried private hopes. Every person faced uncertainty. And in these temples, each offering, no matter how elaborate or humble, was part of the same silent conversation between mortal life and whatever might exist beyond it. As the evening grew deeper and the moon rose higher, Theon walked slowly along the courtyard stones. His pace remained steady, unchanged by the presence of noble visitors or the simplicity of everyday gifts. He paused occasionally to observe the night sky. The constellations shifted almost imperceptibly, tracing patterns known to sailors, farmers, and scholars alike. Stars cared nothing for status. The temple remained quiet, as though holding the weight of many thoughts. Thoughts spoken aloud and thoughts carried silently in the hearts of all who entered. No offering was insignificant. No intention was dismissed. All voices, whether humble or refined, were softened by the stillness of the night. And in that shared quiet, the temple continued its ancient rhythm, welcoming humanity in all forms and holding its mysteries gently. The nights continued, one after another, marked not by loud events or dramatic ceremonies, but by a gentle sequence of gestures repeated across generations. The temple became a shared space where the lives of the wealthy and the humble overlapped, not in conversation, but through quiet ritual. Among the ordinary people who visited the temple, there were artisans and laborers, shepherds returning from long days in the hills, mothers holding hopes for their children, and travelers uncertain of what awaited them beyond the horizon. Their offerings often reflected daily existence, tools worn smooth by use, bits of thread dyed with color from local plants, or small bundles of herbs cultivated with care. These gestures carried a different tone than those of the elite, not lesser, simply distinct. Their form spoke of practicality. Their presentation reflected lived experience. Yet beneath these details, emotion remained universal. One evening, just after dusk, a woman arrived at the temple carrying a woven basket. Her clothing was plain, patched in a few places where fabric had thinned over time. She walked slowly, not from hesitation, but from careful intention, each step deliberate, as though responding to an unseen rhythm. When she reached the altar, she placed the basket at its base and lifted the lid. Inside lay small clay figures, simple, almost delicate. Each figure represented a sheep, with soft rounded forms and modest impressions marking the ears and legs. There were 12 in total, arranged neatly inside the basket. Thean approached and gently examined one of the figures. Its surface bore faint fingerprints, evidence of personal crafting. Each sheep's shape was similar, yet slightly unique, as though shaped individually rather than pressed from a mold. "These are for my flock," the woman whispered. "Each represents one animal I raised. Some were lost. Some survived. This is my thanks, and also my hope." Her voice held neither sorrow nor pride, only reflection. Thean placed the small figures among the other offerings. Their presence added a soft, almost pastoral tone to the altar. For a moment, Thean imagined the woman working in fields, guiding animals through shifting seasons, facing weather, uncertainty, and the steady rhythm of life. Though her circumstances differed greatly from an aristocrat's, her offering carried purpose no less meaningful. Later that same night, another visitor arrived, this time a scholar. His clothing suggested comfort rather than wealth, and his posture carried a quiet confidence often found in those accustomed to contemplation. He held a scroll tied with string. The seal was plain, not marked with insignia. Thean accepted the scroll and placed it gently beside the sealed vessel. Some scholars left written reflections rather than objects, observations, poems, or meditations. Few of these were meant to be read. They were offerings not of prayer, but of thought, a way to let the burden of understanding rest. The scholar stood for a while in calm silence. His gaze remained on the altar, not analytical but softened. When he finally turned away, his expression held a sense of release. Throughout history, archaeologists found fragments of similar scrolls, sometimes only small bits of inked papyrus or clay tablets carrying faint marking impressions. Some contained philosophical phrases. Others bore requests or statements of gratitude. The tone of these writings suggests not fear of divine judgment, but conversation. Elite visitors sometimes commissioned larger works in honor of the gods, stone reliefs, or inscribed dedications. Yet even these elaborate gestures remained restrained. Unlike monuments erected in public squares, temple inscriptions rarely displayed triumph or conquest. Instead, they spoke with language centered on humility, uncertainty, gratitude, or quiet petition. One such inscription, discovered centuries later, read simply, "May clarity come in patience." Its careful carving implied significance. Its content implied acceptance. The contrast between social classes was not erased by the temple, yet softened. The temple did not demand equality. It simply received all gestures with the same stillness. Whether an offering was shaped from gold or clay, whether the giver owned ships or sheep, whether the words spoken were poetic or plain, the response was always identical: silence. Silence not of emptiness, but of presence. As the night deepened, Thean stood near the entrance and looked across the courtyard. Lamps glowed softly, illuminating both elaborate carvings and places where the stone had worn smooth over time. The air carried a faint scent of olive oil and herbs, a fragrance familiar across countless nights. He reflected on the visitors: the aristocrat with marble wings, the woman with clay sheep, the scholar with the sealed scroll, and so many others who had come before them. Different lives, different burdens, different hopes. Yet all had sought a moment where the noise of the world fell away, and something quiet, something older, remained. Thean returned to the altar once more. His hand moved gently along the edge where polished marble met carved indentations. He noticed how the smallest offerings often settled into spaces between the larger ones, as though naturally finding room without displacement. Nothing competed. Nothing tried to define itself above another. Everything rested in quiet cooperation. Across centuries, archaeologists studying temples like this one came to observe that offerings from all social levels were preserved together, not sorted, labeled, or stored separately. Time created its own structure, one defined not by hierarchy, but by endurance. And so, in the peaceful quiet of the night, the altar represented not a division of class, but a shared experience of humanity, reflected in clay, marble, ash, stone, and thought. The temple remained a place where the humble and the powerful stood equally still. As time passed, more individuals arrived quietly, each carrying something shaped by their own experiences. The temple, illuminated by soft oil lamplight, existed almost outside ordinary time. Movement slowed here. Voices dropped naturally into gentle tones. Even footsteps, no matter how firm, seemed to soften the moment they crossed the threshold. One evening near mid-month, a traveler approached, his cloak worn, edges slightly frayed from long roads and changing climates. Theon noticed the fine dust marking the hem, suggesting a journey across inland routes rather than coastal paths. Travelers often carried stories rather than belongings, and yet even they found something to leave behind. From a small leather pouch, the traveler produced a stone, smooth, oval, and polished by flowing water. It bore no inscription, no marking, no decoration. Yet it held something recognizable, the weight of distance. "This came from a river far from here," the man murmured. "I crossed it many weeks ago. I carried this, not as a claim of land or memory, but to remind myself that all things move." Theon nodded, placing the stone with gentle care among the other offerings. It rested near a marble feather, a clay sheep, and a sealed scroll, simple in form, but meaningful in quiet intention. Travelers' offerings often puzzled later scholars. Some believe these items were symbols of safe passage, tokens left after surviving difficult roads or uncertain journeys. Others argued they were acknowledgments of transition, markers of the boundary between what had been and what would come next. Perhaps both interpretations contained truth. After the traveler left, a group of young apprentices arrived. They spoke softly among themselves, careful not to disturb the tranquility. Each carried a small incense cone made from myrrh and herbs. Their teacher, standing beside them, watched with patient approval. Theon recognized this practice. Apprentices from nearby workshops occasionally visited temples to leave offerings marking the completion of training or the beginning of a new stage of learning. Skills were earned gradually, and every milestone, no matter how small, held meaning. One apprentice hesitated before placing her incense on the altar. Her expression held a mixture of pride and self-doubt. She had carved a word into the clay before it hardened, though the lines were faint. When Theon leaned closer, he could just read it. Steadiness. Nothing elaborate. Nothing ornate. Just one word. She exhaled slowly and finally set the piece down. Over centuries, archaeologists uncovered countless items like hers. Offerings marked with single words. Patience, balance, courage, clarity, calm, persistence. These were neither requests nor declarations, but guiding intentions. Not demands, not confessions, not bargains, simply direction. Later that night, a wealthy merchant arrived. His robes were finely woven, decorated in patterns requiring both skilled craftsmanship and significant expense. Yet the object he carried contrasted sharply with his appearance. A small bronze fragment, tarnished and uneven. Theon observed it with curiosity. The merchant spoke before being asked. "This was once part of a statue in my family home," he said quietly. "When I was young, I believed it would last forever. Years changed that certainty. Now I offer what remains. Not because I mourn its loss, but because I understand impermanence more clearly." Theon placed the fragment upon the altar. Though it shimmered faintly in the lamplight, its beauty was subtle, its meaning internal. As the merchant turned to leave, his demeanor suggested not sadness, but resolution, an inner alignment shaped through the long conversation between time and memory. Throughout these evenings, a pattern emerged, one not imposed by the temple, but formed naturally across the gestures of countless visitors. Those with influence offered humility. Those with little offered hope. Those in transition offered markers. Those in reflection offered acceptance. Separations of wealth, education, and social power existed in the outer world, and they remained real, shaping opportunity, expectation, and legacy. But inside the temple, distinctions softened, replaced by a shared sense of being human. In later centuries, historians examining temple findings noted that mixed offerings, gold beside clay, marble beside river stones, were rarely removed or reorganized. Instead, items were allowed to accumulate gradually, forming layers of time rather than categories of value. This refusal to sort or separate suggested something intentional, perhaps a quiet acknowledgement that meaning is not defined by cost or rarity, but by sincerity, presence, and vulnerability. The night sky deepened. Fewer visitors remained, and the temple settled into stillness again. Only the soft flicker of oil lamps interrupted the darkness, casting warm patterns across carved stone. Thean remained for a few final moments, reflecting on the day's offerings and the lives behind them. Though silent, each object held a trace of breath, memory, and intention, a fragment of human experience preserved in form. We finally extinguished the lamps one by one. The glow faded gently rather than abruptly. Shadows returned, embracing the temple with familiarity. Outside, the world continued. Markets, households, conversations, and distant roads. Inside, the altar rested in darkness, holding together the fragile, varied pieces of humanity, without hierarchy, without judgment, without comparison. Only presence. And now, as the night reaches its deepest quiet, we find ourselves slowly stepping back from the temple, from the flickering lamps, from the offerings that have accumulated gently over countless days and nights. The air is soft, scented faintly with olive oil, dried herbs, and the quiet patience of stone that has held centuries of thought, prayer, and care. Imagine yourself walking along the worn stone path, each step steady and calm, following the rhythm of those who came before you, and those who will follow long after. Tonight, we have wandered among humble visitors and aristocrats alike, through the rhythm of daily life, the intimacy of personal offerings, and the mysteries preserved in sealed vessels and carved stones. We have seen how the smallest gestures, a pebble, a braid of grass, a simple clay figure, can carry meaning just as profound as the carefully carved marble of wealthier hands. Perhaps you have felt, as I have, the quiet resonance of time itself, how patient presence, ritual, and intention echo through centuries, leaving traces in ways that are gentle, enduring, and remarkably human. There is comfort in this continuity. The temple itself, the altar, the offerings, even the shadows and the flicker of oil lamps, teach a silent lesson, that the lives of ordinary people and the intentions of the powerful coexist in delicate equilibrium. They remind us that no gesture is too small, no thought too fleeting, and no act of quiet reflection meaningless. History, after all, is not always found in grand events or dramatic victories. It is often held in the soft, steady moments that survive simply because someone noticed them, preserved them, and respected their place in the world. As you lie back and let your body sink further into rest, let the whispers of ancient stones and the gentle patience of past generations ease your mind. Perhaps you imagine the soft rustle of leaves near the temple, the distant flicker of lamplight, or the quiet presence of someone kneeling in reflection, offering their hopes into eternity. History can be a lullaby, a reminder that even across centuries, our lives are part of an enduring rhythm. Before we close, if this kind of storytelling brings you a sense of calm and peace, feel free to like this video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely soothes you. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what hour of the night you find yourself here. There is something comforting about knowing that across time and space, others are resting, reflecting, and perhaps falling asleep to the same quiet stories. Now, dim the lights. Let the whispers of ancient Greece carry you gently toward rest. Let the stories of temples, offerings, and quiet devotion dissolve softly into the night. And as you drift, remember that you are part of a continuum, human, thoughtful, and connected across centuries, even in the gentlest moments of sleep. Sleep well, dear listener, and may the calm of history guide you through the night.